Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're here again. This time, I'm doing the third problem on recurring worksheet 2. So this is a problem about testing. Testing is one of those things that is kind of a pain to learn, but is really essential to this class, particularly when we start doing bigger projects like in Project 2. You'll be very happy if you know how to write JUnit tests and how to do them effectively. Okay, so let's look at this question. So basically, we have a class that doesn't really matter, and we want to write method that multiplies an array, takes an int array and returns all the non-zero values multiplied together. So if there's a 0 in the array, we just want to ignore it, and we should only return a 0 if the array is empty. We want it to work in all kinds of edge cases, blah, blah, blah. And we want to write 3 unit tests that test this method. So your job is to write those tests. So before we actually write the tests, of course, we want to make sure that we understand what the method is supposed to be doing, because you don't want to write tests that are incorrect, otherwise it won't work very well. So if we have a basic array, something like 2 and 0 and 1 and 3, and we multiply all these things together, based off this method, what we should do is we should do 2, we should skip over the 0, multiply by 1, still 2, multiply by 3 is 6, and we should get 6 out of this array, right? That makes sense. If we have an empty array, that's what we want to have, basically 0, and we just want to ignore zeros. I guess it's not clear in the problem, but yeah, if you have an array of all zeros, you would want to return 0 too. I don't know. Anyways, so what we want to do is we want to write tests to test this method to make sure that everything is good. Okay, so we see here that there's a basic functionality and that the number 0 gives us a number of edge cases that we want to look at. So a general tip when you're writing any kind of method like this, or you're writing tests for any kind of method like this, is you probably want to test first the basic functionality, make sure it works in the general case. Then you want to look at individual edge cases and make sure those work as well. So I'm going to ask myself, what is the basic usage of this without any edge cases? Well, the basic usage to me seems like when you just have positive numbers with no zeros in here. So let's say we had 3 and 2 and 3 was our array that we're putting in. It's called R, like a pirate. Anyways, this is a basic case. What is 3 times 2 times 3? Let me do math in my head. It's 18. So this array should give us 18, basically, right? This seems like a basic case. I'm not even going to worry about the zeros case. So let's write a really basic test. So tests in general in JUnit have a little bit of what we would call boilerplate, which just means there's a little bit of syntax you have to kind of just learn with them. So don't feel bad if you end up having to look this up or copy paste it. I'm looking it up myself as I write this, so don't worry about it. But basically, you need to write at test. This basically tells the compiler that it is a test. This thing here is called an ornament. You need to do it in order for IntelliJ to recognize it's a test properly. And then you say public void, give it a name. I'm going to call this test basic because that's what we're doing. It's an ugly C, test basic. And then we're going to, it has no arguments, right? Is how tests work. And then in here is going to be the body of our test. And we know there's going to be like an assert equals statement somewhere because that's normally how we do this kind of thing. All of this stuff is, again, basic syntax. Don't worry if you're like, oh, I have to memorize this. This is the kind of stuff you can copy and paste over and over because the format of unit tests is not going to change in this class, but you'll probably just get very used to it. Anyways, so we want to test the basic behavior, right? What does that mean? It means we want to create this array that I drew up here as an example, and we want to run it through this method, and we want to make sure that when we do that, we get 18, right? So first thing we need to do is create the array. How do we create an array? We can just say int array. I'll call it A because who cares what it's called? It's going to equal a new int array with the elements 3, 2, 3. This is how you instantiate an array in one line in Java if you're not familiar. So we've created our new int array. And then from here, we just want to run it through the method, and we can just put that in our assert equal statement. So how does an assert equal statement work? Normally, it has 2 arguments. The first is what you expect to get back. So it will say expected versus actual if you run it in IntelliJ. The thing we are expecting is 18, and the actual thing we're testing is this method. It's called R multiply, and it takes an array. So we're going to give it A, like this, right? So we're just, this is the method that we're actually evaluating. And basically what this assert equal statement is going to do is it's going to take the number 18, evaluate this method, and make sure that these two are the same thing. So if it equals 18, The test is going to say it passed. If it's not, it's going to raise an error. It's going to say this is the expected, this is the actual, and you know there's something wrong. Okay, so this is the basic functionality of our R multiply, right? But we are told to write 3 tests and we want to test some edge cases. So let's imagine, what are some edge cases here? Well, if you just look at the prompt, there's all this stuff here about zeros and blah, 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 blah. So we should probably test out zeros and make sure things are working well, right? So let's test out an array that looks maybe like this, where we have, where we have a 0 at the end of it. So we have 3, 2, 3, 0. It's the same array as before, but we had a 0, right? This still should equal 18, right? Because we just want to ignore zeros when we have that kind of thing in our test. So keep in mind, what would be a potential problem if we only had this test and passed it, right? This test only passes the basic functionality. So maybe if you wrote the method incorrectly, you wouldn't take the 0 thing into account, and maybe this would evaluate to 0 because it would just multiply 18 by 0. This test would not tell you about that issue. That's why we needed test edge cases, right? Because this test only tests the basic functionality, not any sort of like extended functionality. Okay, so we want to run on this 3, 2, 3, 0 array. So we're going to do a lot of the same stuff. This is where you can really get copy pasting if you're just on IntelliJ. We're going to do a test with public void. We have to name the test something different. So let's call this, test 0, basically. And it's going to look pretty similar. So we're going to have an int array called A. It's a new int array. What does it contain? It contains 3, 2, 3, this time with a 0. And then we are just going to have an assert equal statement. It should still equal 18. This time we are doing R multiply, and it's still A. Notice that everything really here is the same, except I changed the name of the test because the tests need to have different names, and I changed the actual contents of the array. But otherwise, this is just like a simple copy paste, basically, right? And this is the second test. So now let's come up with another edge case. Well, another thing that we see here is it says we should return 0 when the array is empty. Okay, well then it sounds like it would be nice and probably pretty easy to do an empty test. What are we going to do? I'm just going to modify this method here to show you what we would do. We're going to change this. I'm going to have a new test. I'm going to call it test empty. Otherwise it looks the same. New int array. So we're just going to create a new int array of size 0, right? And then we're going to say assert equals 0 and then R multiply of A, right? And this will test what we're looking for. So that's basically all you have to do. These are 3 particular tests that I came up with now, but you can imagine there are other edge cases. So another edge case you might want to test is what if the array is, it contains all zeros, right? That's not explicitly referenced here, but I'm assuming that 0 doesn't count, so that would count as an empty array, so it should also return 0. You might want to test what happens if you use negative numbers in here, because that might be kind of something different, something interesting you want to test. I'm trying to think of other potential edge cases here. Maybe you want to try more than 1 0 in a row, something like that, anywhere that could go wrong. Obviously, you don't know what the implementation of this R multiply array is, but when you start writing your own methods and testing your own methods, you'll kind of know what parts of the method you want to look out for, what parts you want to do some extra testing on. So this is basically what you need to do, and I hope this is somewhat helpful.